So I've started the recording, and this is the July 2nd meeting of the tooling working group. I'll share my screen. And I don't have very much of an agenda today, so the floor I think will be open for discussions anybody on the phone wants to, or on the meeting wants to have. Something we still have ongoing is whether we want to, how we want to nail down the roadmap for Foxy, but, or sorry, for Humble. I'm 2 releases behind. But other than that, here we go. Great. Yeah, so take quick attendance. And I think maybe I'll just ask, well, I was going to say maybe just ask everyone to toss their own name on there. The attendance is not that important, but it's potentially interesting. So I'm going to stop typing actually. And if you're here, please feel free to throw your name on the attendance list if you think that's important. So beyond that, the action items from last week, we didn't have any, or from last time, we didn't have any specifically. I took a note that the auto documentation for ROS 2 packages is just about here. I hadn't realized that the, let's see, ROSDoc 2? No, it's not an OSRF. It's, there's a tool, ROSDoc 2, that will generate the documentation pages for a given ROS repository. And I am planning to experiment with that soon within the next couple of days. There's also some experimental jobs on the build farm that are running this on repositories that are Bloom released, but they're not yet being uploaded anywhere, so we can't actually see the generated pages, but we can see the jobs running and any errors that are coming from them. So something I'd like to do, I volunteered in the TSC meeting to be a guinea pig for ROSBeg 2 to try it out. So I'll be playing with that and see where it goes. Other than that, I don't really have much in the way of updates since the last time. I just moved house, and that took a ton of my time. We still want to investigate the GitHub Actions for Windows and Mac. If I have anyone on the call who is can volunteer to help with that, that'd be awesome. Otherwise, I'll personally get to it when I have time. I don't think we have any community pull requests right now, so we can just get straight into other discussions.
Oh, there's one pull request, Ben.
Oh yeah, I saw those, or I saw some notifications about it yesterday. Oh, sorry, there's one PR under community, or are you talking about the ROSBeg 2?
Oh, the ROSBeg 2 one, yeah.
Yeah, we can take a look at that here if you want to call attention to it, but this is like government or governance PRs that link specifically is.
No, it's fine.
Okay, yeah, I can make a point of trying to take a look at okay, yeah, let's talk about bag merging functionality.
Okay. So I've started looking at how to implement merging bags using the existing ROSBeg code base as much as possible. If I can share my screen, I've just got a very, very, very rough document. How do you share the screen in this? Very go. Okay, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes, okay, cool. Gotta make them bigger.
I don't know. Sometimes it's Control Plus, but not always.
There we go. That's not going to work very well, is it? Okay, so the goal is to merge 2 or more bags together. Basically, so you end up with one resulting bag which looks like it was recorded with all the data originally. So pretty obvious goal, I think, from the word merge. So the simple algorithm I think will do the job is just having one writer and multiple readers, one per input bag, and just reading a message from each reader, writing the next in time message to the output bag, and then taking in the next message from that input bag and just looping until there's no messages left. I've been trying to figure out how to fit this into the existing ROS bag 2 underpass DBP code base in a way that doesn't reuses code where possible and is flexible, I think, and maintainable. And the way I think one possible way of doing this that I've come up with is to have basically produce a multi-bag reader object, so that you'd have we currently have the reader object, which is used to read from a bag. There'll be a multi-bag reader, which is used to read from multiple bags at once, as if there are one single bag, and that would provide the interface for reading multiple bags into one. And then we can just have the command for ROS2 bag merge, which would use that to read data and then write it to an output. So I'm looking for some feedback on if this is the right approach, given the current API, the current code base, and if it isn't the right approach, what would be better, and if it is the right approach, any other advice that may be available. One concern I did have is that the multi-bag reader would want to look like a reader as much as possible, but the reader object is an object, not an interface, and it's final, so you can't inherit from it.
But you could potentially inherit, at least from the base read interface, that the readers inherit from, because that is an interface that's defined.
Yeah, I saw that, but I wasn't sure if that was the correct way to go or not, because it looked like the base reader interface was used for reader implementations rather than the actual reader object.
That's certainly the right approach here. The reason why it's final is really just because you have like a variant of like the typical pimple pattern implemented.
Yeah.
That's really all there is. So like don't deal too much with the final base class. Just really use the actual implementation base class to do this. And I feel like your design is kind of like the right thing. One thing which directly pops in my mind is like that complete workflow reminds me a little bit on that undertaking of like converting bag files. I feel like it goes a little bit under the same umbrella. Let's say I have like bag file 1 recorded from one other bag file and want to convert it into another format or something. So I have the same principle in the end, right? So like I open a bag file, do something with it, and put it back into a writer to write another bag file out of it.
Right.
Kind of like set up a general workflow, so we could have like a multi-bag. So it doesn't really matter where the bag file comes from. We have like some sort of like a lambda which defines, or like a predicate what to do with the incoming data and where to write it back, right? And I feel like it's also
I see what you mean. Yeah, so you'd be able to say you could either have a normal single bag reader or a multi-bag reader. It wouldn't matter. Right. It will go in the same pipeline.
Yeah, especially because so I agree. I think this is this looks like the right approach. This is probably the way I would design it as well. And what it comes down to is you need to have some set of write configuration for the writer that you open up, and then if you happen to have multiple bags that you're opening. But if it was a single bag, this would be the same as the bag rewriter that we've been talking about that can change, splitting parameters or any of those other things, storage backend. And so it almost might be nice, to call this convert is an overloaded term, but maybe this is like a ROS2 bag convert, and it can have multiple input bags, or it can have a single input bag, but it always has a single output bag, at least given the current given this first pass.
Well, I wouldn't even restrict it to this. I feel like there are two different things that work here. So like the general pipeline of converting or modifying bags or whatnot, that's one thing. And then given that we have this architecture in place with the final reader and writer classes, it really doesn't matter. So I feel like the multi-bag reader could just be, that's actually a component by itself, right? So I don't want to convert or merge or whatnot. I really just want to replay them all at the same time. So
synchronized playback,
reading is one thing, writing is one thing, and then you have this general pipeline of like, okay, piping, instead of replaying, you pipe everything you read into the writer straight up. Right.
Yeah, I wonder, I think that it's a nice implementation, and I think it's probably what we should do for a first pass, but I wonder if there are potentially much more efficient ways that we could do some of these conversions under the hood. Like, can you merge SQLite databases much more efficiently using their native tooling, for example?
Probably can. I'm sure they must have some tools for doing things like that.
Guys, I have a question. Why do we need this multi-bug reader at all for the first place? Just to aggregate readers in one loop? It will be like essentially just for loop, go through each reader and read sequentially?
I mean, it just needs to be a thing that does that.
But why do we need this class at all? It's just simple functionality. It's just few lines of code. It's just for this.
I mean, some classes are a few lines of code. It's true.
Yeah, but it's just for loop with it's going to be overcomplicated design with this class. I don't think we need it at all. Can you convince me that we need it?
Yeah, well, the question is it seems like Karsten's saying, we want to have a generic pipeline where you have some reader and some writer, and sometimes the writer is the transport, and sometimes for playback, and sometimes the writer is a bag writer so that you can put it back onto disk. And the idea is you can reuse these components without having to do anything special. You don't have to say that you're doing, you don't have a merge component. You just have a merge command that happens to open multiple bags instead of a single bag by using this multi-bag reader component. You could also do, like they were saying, merge playback or synchronized playback of multiple bags at the same time by using this component. And you don't have to have different cases for those. You don't have to put this for loop in multiple places.
I think anyway you will have to have some logic on down layer to handle configuration, to handle how it should be arranged, how metadata should be arranged, merged. You cannot have this like only high-level Python API ROSBACK to merge in reader and writer and you're done. So it is not going to fly. You should have some logic inside and should have some application inside to handle all this all together.
So what you're saying is that somewhere you need to have logic for configuring multiple. Somewhere you need to have logic for configuring multiple readers and then reading them in a chronological manner. And to me, that sounds like a bit of encapsulated functionality that you would put into probably, I don't know, a class.
I don't know, guys. It's up to you. Really, for me, it looks like overcomplicated design.
It could be a function, a single function. Then I don't think this matters. This sounds like a minor code review implementation nitpick. The fact of the matter is, you need something that instantiates multiple readers and then reads from them in chronological order, not just sequential order.
Yes.
Okay, so if multi-bag reader is a function, if it doesn't need that much code, then that's fine. Like the reindex thing started as a class and ended up as a single function, I believe.
Okay.
It's still a class. I don't know that we ever put it. I never got the chance to go back and turn it into a
fine.
function.
It doesn't really.
Joe, one quick question: is the design you have in place here, is that strictly, or is there an implicit ordering of time in place, or is that, do you see that you want to merge them differently? Maybe just only, I don't know, only in a certain range or in a certain other order than time.
So the requirements we have are to merge based on time, but it could be filtered so that you only want to have a subset of the time available from all the bags, or subset of topics, for example.
Okay, so there's a configuration per individual bag as well, so you can see that I want to have only topic A from bag file 1 and topic B from bag file 2 and so on.
Yeah.
It seems like the feature would be most powerful if you could just provide a full read configuration for each reader and a full write configuration for the writer, and that way you could just mix and match all of the features that already exist. You get the full power of everything.
Yeah. One question I had was whether it's better to hold reader objects or directly hold the reader implementation object with the multi-bag reader. I wasn't sure if there is any benefit to having reader objects like this, or it's better just to skip them. And so the multi-bag reader object would be effectively an equivalent to a reader object in the hierarchy.
Wait, sorry, what's the difference between this one and the other one?
So the reader object is either have reader objects or don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see, let's see, the reader itself doesn't provide that much extra functionality, does it? I just have to remind myself I haven't been working on this for a couple of days. But yeah, there's like not that much going on in the reader itself. Like it's really the reader implementation. So yeah, I don't see any specific reason why you would need this end reader object other than that it just calls the reader implementation for everything. I'm actually not 100% sure now on why why it's there.
So I think if I look at this graphic, it should actually be the other way. You still have, so ROS-bag to bag merge still operates only on the final reader and writer classes. So essentially what you have here is multi-bag reader. This should really be a reader, and the final class reader is getting instantiated with your multi-bag reader implementation.
Oh yeah, multi-bag is the implementation.
Would be an implementation.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense doing it that way around. Okay, that answers that question. Thanks. Okay.
Reader actually provide abstract class, and reader implementation might be different concrete classes like sequential reader, not sequential reader. So it's just specific for implementation. I think you need to stitch with reader interface.
Yeah. Okay, I will go back and look at the design again and try and I'll put the multi-bag reader thing where the reader implementation is for a start, and I will look at seeing how to make it a more of a generic convert function, a convert pipeline functionality, not just merging, and then make merging a special case of that so that it's more flexible for the future.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is basically there. It comes down to a couple of like nitpicks. But most of the implementation is independent of this portion. Like you've got a multi-bag reader, you know that you're going to have multiple things. You need to sort which one, or just take whichever one's the lowest timestamp and provide that message.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you mentioned a bit earlier about whether it's easier to use the SQLite tools. One of the concerns that I would have with that approach is that it only works on SQLite-based ROS bags.
Yes.
So if you've got a different backend, it wouldn't work. And whereas this approach will work on any format ROS bag.
Yeah, I think that we could potentially like take this approach as the base implementation, and if a storage implementation wants to provide an optional merge interface, if that turns out to be more performant, then we could make that into a storage API thing.
Yeah, I mean the ROS2 bag merge command could look at the formats of the input bags it's given and decide which way to do the merge.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, exactly. You could call the storage implementation and say, do you provide a merge, and are all of the bags of the same storage format? Because given this approach, you could have, a level DB bag and a SQLite bag and write them both into a, I don't know, HDF5 bag, which would be pretty nice.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you have your screen back.
Cool. Yeah, I think this will be a really useful feature. So thanks for taking on the design. Diagrams really helped with visualizing what was going on.
Yeah. Thanks for the advice.
Okay. Anybody else have any specific features they wanted to talk about? A feature that came up in the Web Tools working group yesterday. Oh, I'll start sharing my screen. And I was wondering if some of them might hop on the call today. I invited the Foxglove team to potentially join us here. Not sure if any of you are familiar with the Foxglove. It's a fork of WebViz that's fully open source, and so they've got a dev team because the WebViz itself is not a fully open source tool, and so this is nice because you can actually run your own instances and extend it more easily. They just added a plugin API recently, so that you don't need to fork the code base to add your own extensions. Which is cool. So browser or Electron-based ROS visualizer application, but they were wondering about message definitions in ROS bags because one of their primary use cases is for playing back recordings, and this has come up in other places as well. So a feature I'd like to start thinking about, but I don't have it designed for or anything yet, is message definitions in ROS bags. And is anyone on the call familiar with, I know that we can have the message info on subscriptions, and that can give us the ROS IDL type support introspection information. And that introspection information gives us something about at least the serialization format. Does it give us enough to say that we can actually reconstruct, can we reconstruct the IDL definition of the message?
Pretty much.
Okay, so theoretically, we have all of the information that we need to store this information in the bag. Is that a correct assumption?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is, do we need to do any ROS2 core work, or is this now just a feature in ROS Bag 2 that needs to be built?
So what's the general purpose? Let's say I have the introspection, then what can I do with this?
So for this web tool, they would like to, they have, since it's not using native generated binary code for parsing messages, it ends up being, I guess, I think it's JSON at the end of the day that goes into their visualizers. So the idea is take the serialized messages from the ROS bag, deserialize them using this IDL information into a JSON message that they can throw at the visualizers without having to have the message definitions baked into their local workspace.
But you still need the messages locally, because otherwise, how do you convert it into a C++ class?
Yeah, in this case,
Python instance to that matter.
Yeah, I mean, so for this particular ask, they don't need it to be a C++ class or Python instance. But another question, I think, is for, oh no, can we do playback without having the messages installed locally? So for example, no.
We were talking a couple of years ago already about the fact that we could maybe put the actual message definition in the payload or user load or something. DDS has a field for that, where you can actually have like some user-defined code with it, which is not necessarily the CDR payload. Called user data or something. I don't remember right now.
Yeah.
But we actually ship some sort of message definition in that user data field, so that we can actually deserialize and serialize messages, even though we don't have the message type support and the calling libraries installed. But,
yeah.
Otherwise, you don't really can do it.
So I think the question for me here is whether you could, say you have one, robot computer that has the full workspace installed, and you have a separate machine that only has ROSBEG2 and no message definitions. Could you record across the network all of that data and play it back such that this machine at least understands the messages, even if the recording machine doesn't have any understanding of them?
I think you can. I'm pretty sure I saw in the code base that you can it records them just as serialized data, which means it wouldn't need to have the message definition available for recording.
No, you still need a type. You still need a support for the serialized messages.
Yeah, like we are avoiding the serializing and deserializing of those messages by just playing back the data exactly, but we're constructing our publishers with a type.
Yeah. So for playback, yeah, you'd need it.
Yeah.
I want to add that I saw similar request actually from company named Tenaris. They do back conversion from ROS1 to ROS2 and backward from ROS2 to ROS1. And they have also request to store message type support somewhere in metadata in ROSBEG2 to be able to read it without type support and convert smoothly to ROS1. So we don't need to install full stack. It's similar request actually for similar purpose.
Yeah, we'd really like to use it too. We've got our bag database tool, which is quite popular in ROS1, and it's just used for searching accumulated bag files, but it's useful to extract metadata from those bags to help people understand what's in them as we go.
Mm-hmm. I guess you can also use that if you have those message definitions, you can use it to do numerical parsing of fields and do those analyses without having to worry about having anything else installed.
Yeah, that was going to be my other, it's not quite this question, but it would be really nice, from what I understand now, we can't really access like playback, or we can't get into the messages in the bag files without running a full like ROS node, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in ROS1, you could just open up the bag file with the Python API and just iterate through the messages, and process them as fast as you want, which was really useful for hooking it into analysis tools that don't live in ROS.
Yeah, so we could do that. Well, you still needed to have ROS installed in order to do that. You just didn't need to actually construct a node.
You don't need to ROSBEG2 either, though.
Yeah, exactly. There's an API for that now. The Python API could use some filling out, but there's no technical limitation that is stopping us from filling out those functions that we need there.
One of the samples that I submitted in that PR is there for writing, but one of them does it without constructing a node.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah, and we actually for a long time avoided making the ROS2 core, or RCL CPP a dependency of the ROSBEG2 C++ interface, but I believe we ended up making it a dependency for, I can't remember for exactly which reason, but most of the functionality of ROSBEG2 CPP, the writers and storage and stuff, does not depend on specifically ROS code at all. I wonder if we could get back there. I have to remind myself what we used it for. It was only like March this year. It's like a couple months ago that we ended up adding that dependency.
Actually, the reason was pretty straightforward in the end, so I can actually write ROS messages, and I can use the serialization on it.
Oh yeah. Looking at it, it was for the RCL CPP serialized message class.
Correct.
Yeah. Because that didn't exist in, I don't know, because we already depended on like type support and stuff like that, but they added that to the client library. Okay. Anyways.
So currently we have dependency from logging infrastructure in RLCPP, and also have dependency from context, checking if RLCPP context is valid in a few places.
Yep. Yeah. So we don't have to solve this conversation right now. It's just trying to, get the collected understanding of the room in terms of what we can do here, because it has come from multiple different directions, the request for this, and it would be nice to get really concrete use cases of like, what are we using this for, so that we can make sure whatever we build supports it. What else? Okay, that's some good thinking. I feel like we just need to look deeper into this, both in figuring out the use case. Like, we know for sure people want this, but it would be best to figure out what they want it for, so we make sure not to build the wrong thing. Multi-bag is that was the conclusion we came to, right? That multi-bag reader is a reader impl and it has sequential readers, and then the reader itself stays the same, so you still can just have a reader and a writer and call that I still don't know what we want to call. Like, there's this clear pipeline that we have come up with for multiple different features of open a reader, open a writer, write directly from the reader to the writer rather than publishing on transport. And this pipeline implements a lot of separate feature requests with one design, but I'm not sure what to call it. I mean, maybe this pipeline gets called by different verbs from the command line, but I'm not sure. Because there's like splitting a bag into, a single bag file into smaller bag files, still having it be a single bag. That gets implemented by this pipeline as well. Changing storage implementation, changing compression, all those things. So it seems like rewrite is the one that I keep coming back to that makes sense of all the features, but maybe we don't need to call it all the same thing, even though under the hood it's the same implementation. I'm not 100% sure on that. Like, maybe it's more obvious from a user perspective if you just have a bunch of verbs that you can call.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the user is going to see the verbs anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. So if we can just say, yeah, I guess we could say merge, split. And well, maybe merge makes sense because you have to have multiple input bags, but then you can have rewrite for other things. Because most of the rewrite use cases I'm considering are a single input bag and a single output bag. You might want to have one that has a single input and multiple output bags based on topic filtering, perhaps. But
yeah, I mean, you can have pretty complex multiple inputs and multiple outputs, and where
yeah.
each topic goes depending on filter specifications or something. I think if you wanted to, I'm not sure how someone would actually use it, but it should.
I think that, yeah, potentially. Well, you might say I have a big bag full of everything, and I want to split out the camera streams into one bag and all the rest of the sensors into a different one, so that I can just send that to the perception team or learning algorithms or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe what we need to do is make sure that the APIs are clear and then figure out how we tie it into the command line. Because as long as we provide the tools to do these flexible things, and you can do it via a program or script, then it doesn't really matter how the command line's presented.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking, was to get the API done right, and then just have a merge command that uses that to implement merging, and then we can figure out splitting and filtering and so on.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other ROSbag or GitHub Action or cross-compile things that anybody has on their mind right now that they would really like to discuss? For me, I'm making it my top priority right now. Now that we're well past the last distro release and we're into the meat of the time between distros, I'm trying to take this early stage to stabilize ROSbag 2 tests. We have a lot of flaky tests right now, and I would like to be able to remove the xfail markers. So for me, I just wanted to call out that that's something that I'm trying to focus on right now.
Speaking of tests, is there any code that can be used to easily programmatically generate bags in memory that I can use to test the multi-bag reading functionality?
Let's see. There's it's still a little verbose, but there are utilities for creating little bags.
Yes, we have mock reader in tests. You can refer to it, mock reader.
Oh, yeah. There's also in here perhaps, so there's there's ways of constructing little mock. There is the mock reader, and then you can do whatever you want with it. But I'd take a look at test play, because that's the best example right now of how we're generating a bag full of messages. And it's not maybe not the best, but
it'll give me an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. About that much gets you a test bag with a few topics in it.
That'll do the job. Okay, thanks. I'll take a look at that.
Okay. So reducing the flaky tests. I'm trying to put to the top of my queue everything that says whatever test is flaky. The build farmer comes along occasionally and gives us a slap on the wrist for that. And I would really just like to not. We have a whole class of these problems, and a lot of them are based on timing. We have timing dependent tests, and sometimes the runners are slow. And I think that's the major category of the flaky tests, is the ones that are not deterministic that way by using sleeps or specific time-based conditions. So that's just something to call out. The other one is I've actually had some contributors working on cross-compile, which is a new thing. Hasn't really happened before, but I guess that tool's starting to get some attention. In terms of the Humble roadmap, I'm still not sure exactly how we want to handle this. It comes down to what features are important to the people implementing. So it's more like writing a plan of, everyone on the call here who works on ROSBAG, what's important to you. Maybe I want a collective place to write down these ideas. I don't know. Does anyone think there's value in that exercise, or should we kind of just go ad hoc? Okay. If I'm getting no volunteers, then I'm not going to do anything special there for now, and I'll keep thinking about it. It would be nice to have something to present to the TSC, but I can figure out something basic. I don't have any more topics for today. We could look at the backlog board, but we haven't been getting that much value out of it, I don't think. This one, overriding QoS profiles doesn't work, is in progress by me. We have it's the same thing. I should probably just close this as a duplicate. But I would like to wait for the person to get back to me to see if they're, oh, okay.
Hey, Emerson?
Yep.
I have a question about the ROS2 bag format.
Oh, hi, John. Yeah.
Hey.
When did you hop on the call? Did you just get here?
I just got in here a minute ago. I would join in today. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of my questions is about the connections, the concept of connections that was in ROSBag 1. So I noticed that the ROSBag 2 format doesn't have a concept of publishers or connections.
We do have publishers. Are you talking about on playback or on recording?
I'm talking about the at rest data that's stored on disk.
I see.
So to go open a SQLite file and the metadata.yaml, I don't see any reference to connections or publishers, either of those concepps. Is that intentional?
Well, so I believe, sorry, let me collect a thought. DDS is a little more anonymous than ROS1 was in terms of the pub sub architecture. However, there is now, since we first implemented, or it wasn't me, but since probably Karsten first implemented the storage for messages, there has been exposed this message info metadata that has a unique publisher ID, at least, for each message, which is something I've been thinking we need to store, but we haven't gotten around to it yet. So at the very least, we could have some publisher ID on a per message basis. And the reason I personally want to use that is because if there are multiple publishers in the system on the same topic offering different quality of service profiles, right now our playback is not fully correct for that situation because we create a single publisher to playback all of the messages using a best guess QoS profile, which means that it's just not fully accurate in terms of who gets what. So I'd like to create a multi-publisher playback to match the original system, at least in terms of which QoS profiles are on those publishers. So
great.
Yeah, in order to create that playback, we need to have that information. Does that solve it? Like some ID on a per message basis?
That's the minimum I think that you would need. So there's different ways you could go. Instead of right now we have a top. There's this triplet of topic ID, timestamp, and data. You can swap out topic ID with connection ID and have a little table of connections. You could have, yeah, that's one way to do it. You could additionally add another column and have both. It's a little redundant because you can always go look up what the topic was from the connection. There's, but you know, you can. Yeah, that would those would work.
Okay, cool. And now that you're here, we'd started talking about a little earlier the storing message definitions in the bag, and I know that's something we talked about yesterday at the Web Tools group, and we were trying to figure out more concretely the use case, the workflow that would be involved with that, so that we can make sure we're not designing the wrong thing. Like storing the message definition in the bag is not quite specific enough to figure out what we need.
Okay, so in my head, there are two separate things that it solves. One is I'm a person or a company, and I've created this message, like my own, you know, steering angle and input velocity. For whatever reason, I made my own message. And let's say I stored the input acceleration as a float. And then one day I realized, like, oh, you know what? We really need this to be discrete. I'm going to change it from float 32 to int 32. So I change my message definition and I start recording data. If I was to go and play back that old data in the new system, there would be silent data corruption, where now I'm getting these massively large acceleration integers because we're interpreting floats as int, and there's nothing that catches this today. You know, there's no signal from the system that said, like, hey, your data format has changed. You're trying to use the wrong message definitions to play back this data. At best, it would crash because you like added a field or removed a field, and now the CDR doesn't parse. So, but it's not necessarily, if there's alignment, it will just silently corrupt. And so that's something that storing the message definition, you can do a sanity check and you can say, okay, the message definition that my system uses is here. Do the strings match, or do they canonically match? Like if I generate a canonical message def and compare that, does it match? The other thing that it solves that is really important to Foxglove, us as a company, and I think also just researchers in general, is if I email you a bag, are you able to look at the data that's in there? Like if I wanted to upload a data set for public consumption of like, hey, here's for researchers to consume. I published a navigation library. I want people to be able to test it against data. I want to put a bag on the internet. And that's something that you can do in ROS 1 bag format, and it would be great to preserve in ROS 2.
Yeah, that was one of the things we came to the conclusion of, is being able to do at least a numeric analysis of the information in a bag. Like if you understand what the fields are, you can pull out some of that data. The part that got confused about was if you're trying to play back that data against other nodes in a system, those nodes still need to have a message definition in order to subscribe to the ROS bag data you're playing back. And so that part still seemed nebulous, or like it wouldn't be supported.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any value. I mean, certainly you could have a node that starts up and starts playing back this data that it's never seen before otherwise.
Listening to was the question. Like the bag itself could, yeah.
I don't know if there's much value in that. I think this is for offline analysis. Let's say you have a data pipeline that consumes bags and ingests them to process the LiDAR data. And you've had 5 or 6 iterations of how you store this data over the course of the last 6 months. You want your data pipeline to be able to process all of that data.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, as a very first thing, it's just like detect whether the definition matches what it is you're publishing or not. And this was, I remember, a thing in ROS 1 where it would say like, oh, your checksums don't match for the topic type.
Yeah, it did both, which was a little redundant, but I guess, sped up the comparison. They stored both the MD5 sum, and which I wouldn't use MD5 today, but that's what they had at the time. And then they also had the full message definition. The full message definition is very important. If you are a visualization tool, or you're a data pipeline, or you're something that's disconnected from an actual like robot or robotics developer's desktop that has the stack, you want to be able to fully understand the file. If it showed up in an email, if it showed up at the end of a data pipeline, if it just was pulled out of S3 and you have no idea like when it was generated. Yes, yeah, I think having fully self-describing data formats is important here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to be able to analyze it, and you can build your own analysis. It doesn't have to plug into any existing subscribers or visualization tools.
That's right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So okay, so we've got kind of these two cases of one, like generically be able to analyze the data, pull out fields from it, and then two, detect whether things have changed. And this is a problem right now for ROSBEG 2 on a in general, yeah.
That problem also exists in the live running ROS2 system. When you connect in, there's no way to know if I have the correct message definition.
If you've got these DDS participants that match across different computers on the network, and you don't, yeah, exactly, you don't know if they're have the same, except there is the introspection. Oh yeah,
it's kind of like a long outstanding problem, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, it's not just ROSBEG, but like one thing, at least at the time of writing, when we came up with this at Bosch, was like that's what we used the converters for. Essentially, really, like you could have, at the time of writing, it's not perfect, but it works to a certain extent. If I know exactly what I'm doing, that you could spawn a converter in which every message gets passed through a conversion step. And that also allows you not only to modify the message, but actually more like to enhance the message. Because it happened quite often, not that you change the data type from float to int, but rather that like during the course of development, you see, oh man, I'm missing one field or something. I need some more information. And for that, we use the converters where we could just add an additional field to it or something. Right?
Yeah, and that I think
quick workaround, but I feel like the thing of evolving messages should actually be tackled somewhere in ROS2 in general.
If you know that the message needs to be converted, you can take that approach. I think the danger that I'm seeing in the challenge is that there's no feedback from the system telling you that you need to do that.
Absolutely.
If I forgot to hit compile, and I have 3 different computers running in a ROS system, and I forgot to hit compile on this one after changing the message definition, it's just going to try. It'll try to decode everything.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, that's something that I think would be really appropriate for us to bring up with in the ROS2 core. Like I think that's something that maybe should be a humble priority if we can make it one.
Yeah. Back on the bag format itself, though. So yeah, storing message definitions is a great step forward. I brought up yesterday, I'm running into a lot of challenges in this implementation from the SQLite DB files. When we're running in a native environment, we're writing either C or we're writing Node.js. It's pretty straightforward and it works fine. But when we try to do a full web-based implementation, this is like drag and drop a ROSBEG 2 into your browser and get pretty visualization on your screen. It's not impossible, but we're running into a lot of limitations and challenges.
Yeah, do you have an idea of what format would work a lot better? Because I don't think we have any hard limitations on what format we could choose here.
My inclination, my go-to is that as a flat append-only binary format, similar to ROS1 bag. It doesn't have to be identical. Previous companies have implemented this a few different times where it's like inspired by ROS1 bag, but yeah, essentially, I think we're trying to put these triplets of either connection ID or topic ID, timestamp, and a blob of data describing each message, and we want to, at a minimum, just get that onto disk. If we can do some extra metadata, we can do indexes. Those are bonuses on top of it. But I think those are the requirements. And
what's the difference between a custom binary format and a DB3 format from SQLite?
So SQLite has never had a second implementation. It's actually one of the reasons that you can't create an IETF spec around anything that uses SQLite. This has been tried in browsers and failed because the IETF requires 2 independent implementations. And at this point, it looks like there will never be a second implementation of SQLite. Everybody takes the exact same code base and compiles it for different architectures, creates wrappers for it, etc. And so we're sort of bound by not how do we interpret this file format, but how do we take this particular code base and use it to access the data. And so in SQLite for the web case, so far that means using this one library called SQL.js. It's a WebAssembly compilation of SQLite that has a lot of limitations. One is that you have to pass in, instead of a file point or a file handle, you have to actually pass in the full raw byte array of the entire thing, which means that it has to be stored in memory twice at a minimum. So you take your JavaScript heap size, let's say 4 gigabytes, have that. That's the largest bag that you'll ever be able to read in the browser. In the ROS bag, for rosbag.js, that library, you can drop a 40 gigabyte bag, and you can seek and you can read through the entire 40 gigabytes. That will never happen with ROSbag 2 in its current incarnation.
Yeah. So I think I'm wondering, I don't know if we want to. It's going to be a really big decision to change the default implementation, but what we could do is, as we're starting to talk about, we were just having a conversation about converting bags to different storage formats after the fact. I wonder if we could have a much more browser-friendly format and provide an easy tool for converting from the SQLite bag to that other format, and we could even put it on a server somewhere. You can provide that as a service, like drop your bag here and it'll spit out the web-friendly bag. If you don't want to have them running it locally, like if we're trying to do purely browser interaction from the user's perspective. Mm-hmm. So I guess the question there is what, we need to build that other format, and we will want to support it on the native side, and then need to just finish up this conversion feature, which probably won't be very difficult. I think the harder part is coming up with a new storage implementation.
Okay. This is something that I would be willing to put effort toward, but I'm curious on just getting a temperature read of would this be something that could possibly live in the ROSbag 2 official repo? Even if it's not the default implementation, would you be open to taking it into that repo?
I would rather probably put it into as a separate repo in the ROS tooling or ROS Web Tools organizations. I'd be very happy to do either of those. But since it's plugin based, it's really easy to say, this is a plugin. It's independently installable for ROSbag for ROSbag 2. We could even try to add it to the ROS2 desktop variant so that it gets installed by default. But I'm trying to avoid adding more packages to the ROSbag 2 repo itself because it already has too many.
Okay.
It's just getting slightly difficult to make. Karsten, you might have a different opinion on that. I'm personally this is a long list.
Yeah, I second your opinion. The problem I have though is if you really want to go down that use case, hey, I'm downloading a bag file, whatever, multiple gigabytes, right? Make it 10 gigabytes, and now I have to convert this, and so now I have to my data size on disk because I have to bring it from a SQLite DB3 format into some custom binary format. Now I have duplication, so I have 20 gigabytes on my disk just to visualize it in a browser. I feel like that's a little cumbersome for what it is, and I wonder if there's a way to maybe reach out to the SQLite JavaScript developers to actually change their implementation, because it feels like just even if I have like 2 GB files, I wonder if that's worth to load in a browser completely. I mean, that seems a little weird to me. Maybe you know that, but like, is that implementation for SQLite in the browser, is that open source? Is that something you can reach out to the maintainers?
It is open source. The challenge is, and this is not impossible, but it's a pretty significant undertaking. Instead of it accepting, right now it wants to load the entire database into a binary buffer. It can move into the WebAssembly memory space as a WASM heap allocation, and then it can just run the SQLite code against this thing as if it was just a pointer. What you really want is to load this as a file and do seeking. So you do fopen and fseek and fread to read this. And so really you'd have to provide hooks for those syscalls in mscripton that bound back to JavaScript and allowed you to do your own custom implementation of those syscalls so that it could do random seeks on a large file. This is possible. There's nothing that technically prevents it. It's just, I think, probably a fairly challenging undertaking. Well, somebody was at it, they could also add big int support. So right now we store nanoseconds, and that's not going to work for, unless all your data is between 1970 and 1975. It's well, actually, I think 1970 April 15th, right? That's when the 53-bit max integer stops.
Oh, it's 53 bits. You don't get 64 bits of int there.
If you have a float, if you have a double, which everything in JavaScript's a double, the max safe integer size is 53 bits.
Oh, that's not that big. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, it gets you 4 months into the Unix epoch when you're using nanoseconds, and so what I'm doing is I'm casting everything, every single number I get. Well, timestamp I'm casting to a string, and then I do big int string parsing, which works. It's quite slow. But that's another. So there's a number of these things that could be fixed. Like nothing's technically preventing. It's just I think there's going to be a bit of a road ahead, and that may be something to kick back to the Web Tools working group and talk through. How could we make this work?
Yeah, I don't want to close the door on having a storage implementation that is easier for the Web Tools to use, though.
Sorry, I'm really not into web development at all. But like, what's the estimated effort for you to have like something? We have like ROS-back C++ interface. Is this something that like ROS-back JS, like a ROS-back JavaScript implementation which we could run in the browser? Is that a thing?
So I have one that should be done sometime mid next week. And it will work. You'll be able to drag and drop and load. And it has different backends. It has a Node.js and a web backend. But the Node.js backend is going to perform significantly better. And that's kind of the issues I'm bringing up, is that is in this world where it's going to kind of demote the pure web use case to a second-class citizen. You'll have to go through a transform step. You'll have to deal with the 2 GB limitation or something. And that's not an complete deal breaker, but I just wanted to surface that and make sure that everyone's aware of the trade-offs that are being made.
The reason why I'm asking is more like, I mean, it's great that we have SQLite as a default implementation, but the same use case holds true for, let's say you have your own custom, like your company, you have your own custom data format, but now I want to use the web tools to visualize my own data backend. which is maybe a different binary format from whatever other people use, right? So if I had a native ROS-back2 implementation in the browser, I essentially don't matter. Like it essentially doesn't matter which backend we use, right? Because you have the same kind of like storage formats, APIs and whatnot to use. And this all goes into presumption that I could use the same API I used in C++ in a browser. So that's
oh yeah, no. I mean,
stuff about web. But,
this idea, this concept of ROS2 is an SDK. It's not a data specification. Works very well when you're building a bunch of systems that are all working together and they are all running the same code base, and you can kind of control the whole ecosystem. But once you're in the bag world, when you're building up like multiple years of different formats that have had different message definitions and these iterations on it, you don't have that luxury anymore of saying there's one set of message definitions, there's one set of data storage even, that you've never made any changes in how you serialize your data. It gets more challenging. And so in that world, if you store your data, if I made my own plugin and I said, I'm going to store all of our data in metadata of Photoshop documents, right? Like that's great, it'll work, but I don't think you can expect any off-the-shelf tooling to automatically support your data.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying about conversions potentially being expensive for large files or, by disk, but I'm willing to take the approach that storage is basically free these days, and as long as we can support the use cases, then that's a good start at least.
Oh, but like that's one thing, but I also feel like converting 10 gigabytes of data just doesn't, like, okay, let's say you have the storage, but it also takes, I don't know, a handful of minutes to really do this.
But even then, maybe it's worth it.
And then I have to potentially do this for every data format I have, right? So like I have because like you have a two-dimensional, like let's say we have a BOSH, we have our own data format, something else than SQLite. Now I have the conversion again for this, even though I have my plugins for replaying them, but now I have to write another plugin for converting into something else, in another binary format.
I don't think you need another tool to convert that specifically. The conversion that I'm talking about here is as long as you have a reader for your data format, we can construct a writer for a different data format. And so as long as you've built a storage implementation, we should be able to convert between them, at least in the native tooling, freely. And then if you just put that on a server somewhere, you can do all the conversions. Because I think we're trying to support the user who's like a data scientist who doesn't have a development environment locally and is going to do some like, I don't know, Jupyter notebook stuff and some other data munging. Like it's not a software developer who's going to be like using this use case as much. I mean, you still may have those people doing it, but we're specifically trying to support a persona that is less inclined to have ROS installed on their workspace.
Okay.
At least that's the way I think about it.
So either don't have ROS installed or the data that you're trying to open doesn't match
your local installation.
Your local installation, yes. A colleague sent you a bag. Your whole company switched over to a different format 3 weeks ago.
Or a different ROS distro. Yeah.
New distro upgrade. Yes, all of these things. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can. I mean, we're going to build the conversion thing anyways. We already need that for other reasons. And then, yeah. So I think we have a few different things here that we need to build to support this use case, one of which is storing message definitions. That's a pretty crucial one. And maybe I'll get started on a design for that, or if anybody else has the inclination or energy, please feel free to jump in, let me know. I'm just going to start doing some sort of initial research on how we could implement that. And then the next step is this conversion or rewriter functionality, some of which Jeff is, I think, starting to look at. Like this bag merging pipeline will look, if not identical, almost exactly like this conversion functionality. So we should be able to get there from where you're at, Jeff. And then the last thing, or a third thing, is thinking about what storage formats we might want to use on the web. And that maybe, John, you can give us some input on. We're over time for this meeting, and so I don't want to hold everyone too long. I think something we could decide is, do we want to have a breakout meeting next week, maybe to talk about this stuff, or do we want to just meet up at the next regularly scheduled meeting on the 16th? Anybody else have opinions about that? I'm always happy to jump on the call, but we can also wait until the following time. 2 weeks goes by quick.
Yeah, either works for me.
Okay. So yeah, I think what we can do between now and then, because we do need to get going, is think about those three parts. To me, they come together into a set of generic tools that will be useful for a variety of reasons, and one of those reasons is the web use case, and the storage format for the web is the specific use case that really only applies to that. But even then, if it's easier to parse for folks, then maybe some people will want to use that instead of SQLite. But okay, I think we'll just meet in 2 weeks, and between now and then, think about these portions of it as well as everything else that's going on. But yeah, we already were talking about message definitions, so we need that. Okay, cool. Thanks everyone, and thanks for coming, John. This helped to drive the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be a part of it. It's exciting to see all this stuff coming together.
Yeah.
Hope by next meeting I will have some libraries to show off around serialization, deserialization.
Great. Yeah, be happy to see it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again in 2 weeks for the next tooling working group meeting.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Sounds good. See you later.